Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 29th of November of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Russia, because the Russian Federation every single day repeats the same thing. Zelensky will not sign the peace treaty on behalf of Ukraine, because I will continue, Zelensky doesn't have a legal power. This time this information and this thing was stated by Dmitry Medvedev, and he predicted the collapse of Zelensky's system, and he said that this process is inevitable. The corrupt government surrounding his has collapsed, noted that deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council. So this is the same thing that the president of the Russian Federation stated several days ago. So that is why, and due to the fact that Russia will never sign any document with the current president of Ukraine, Zelensky, that is why Russia now holding talks on Ukraine only with the United States. In the process of resolving the Ukrainian crisis, the main peacekeeping mission of the US President Donald Trump and his associates is to be carried out. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said, stressing that Russia is now holding talks on Ukraine only with the United States. So that is why today the Ukrainian delegation was sent to the United States of America. And this delegation should talk with Americans once again, probably the last time before Americans travel to the Russian Federation. A Ukrainian delegation is heading to the United States for talks with Witkoff and Kushner. The delegation includes National Security and Defense Council Secretary Umerov and Deputy Foreign Minister Kaslitsa. The parties will discuss the peace plan, which was reduced from 28 to 22 points following the Geneva talks. According to the agency, European countries have been excluded from discussing the details of many aspects. They are participating only in bilateral negotiations where their input is needed at this stage, for example, in determining security guarantees. So Ukrainians are heading to the United States of America, and they will try once again to convince the United States of America to make changes in their plan, 22 points plan or 28 points plan. But telling the truth, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what kind of changes the Ukrainians will ask to do to make the Americans, because most likely they will not change anything, or maybe they will change, but at the end they will travel to the Russian Federation with, let's say, two plans, with their original plan, with the original 28-point plan, and with probably modern updated plan with the Ukrainian participation, which most likely would be rejected immediately. So, and of course, as usually before such big talks and last talks, both the Russians and the Ukrainians sent messages through media, through events in the world. The Russians sent a very interesting message using Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban. Today he stated that Ukraine should be a buffer state after conflict ends. According to the Hungarian Prime Minister, Ukraine should remain a neutral state and become a buffer between NATO and Russia. NATO and Russia must agree on the size and equipment of limited Ukrainian forces that can operate in the buffer zone. It is also necessary to provide guarantees that neither side will subject this buffer state to its authority. So this is the first side of the medal, and of course the second side of the medal is not just the neutral status, also sanctions. Ukraine will have to lift sanctions both from Russia and from the European Union, if there is one, if there are such a kind of sanctions. Furthermore, Ukraine will be forced to trade with Russia and European at the same level. So this is going to be a buffer zone, and this buffer zone would be controlled both by Russians and by the European Union, and Ukrainians will be forced to do everything these two blocs are willing and will ask Ukraine to do. Another message was sent by the Russian Federation, and that was another massive missile and drone attack across Ukraine. So this map was published this morning. This map was published by several pro-Ukrainian sources, and here we can see the approximate routes of Russian missiles and drones that were flying above Ukraine. And as you can see, according to these roads and according to these lines, red lines, yellow lines, blue lines, and so on, Russians mainly were attacking the city city of Kiev and the territory around the city. Lots of explosions and lots of damages were recorded, and exactly from this area. Furthermore, later, pro-Ukrainian sources published their article where we can see the results of work of their air defense. Ukrainians stated that during the previous night, the Russians used 632 air vehicles to attack Ukraine, and Ukrainians reported that they managed to bring down just 577 targets. So this is the message that was sent by the Russian Federation during the previous night, and the message of this attack is very clear. The Russians were trying to tell that if you don't accept our proposals, if you don't accept our demands, most likely you will face a real and complete blackout through Ukraine. For example, today, as a result of the previous attack, several government offices stated that more than 500,000 Kiev residents were left without electricity as a result of today's combined attack. And this is just the message. This attack didn't have the purpose to destroy the critical infrastructure of Ukraine completely, but if Ukraine doesn't accept Russia's demands, most likely the Russians will try to do this. And this was just a message to Zelensky, just a message to Kiev authorities to stop and to start listening. But Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, is not so simple. Of course, he sent a message from his side as well. And Zelensky, that was very interesting, sent a message from the territory of the Black Sea. According to information we have, according to different sources, Ukrainians attacked two vessels in the Black Sea that were moving from the territory of Turkey in the direction of the city by the name of Novorossiysk. The sources are saying that these vessels belonged to the Russian Shadow Fleet, and these two vessels were attacked by Navy drones of the armed forces of Ukraine. At least several sources stated this, and these vessels were, as you can see, destroyed. The most important thing that Ukrainians or somebody on behalf of Ukraine or something like this, or maybe this is attack with false flag, very difficult to say, but the thing is that somebody attacked commercial vessels, not the military vessels, not something like this. They attacked commercial vessels, which means that this is a completely new stage, a new probably type of the special military operation and conflict between Russia and the European countries. And the message is also very clear. The Europeans or the Ukrainians or somebody who is standing behind this attack was trying to send a very clear signal to Putin that if he continue insisting on his demands and so on, most likely during the next stage of the special military operation during 2026, some third party, or maybe not a third party, but somebody we know very well, will destroy every single commercial vessel of the Russian Federation that is being used by the Russian Federation for the oil transportation purposes. It will take time, of course, but obviously somebody, and there are forces in the world who will be able to do this. And of course, this can lead to unpredictable consequences to the Russian Federation. The Russian Federation will be forced to probably reply and to strike back. So as you can see, Zelensky is trying to tell us, maybe not Zelensky, but somebody is trying to tell us that there are still possible ways how to continue war. There are still lots of territories. Ukraine is a very huge country, and even if Russia continue offensive operation, there are still lots of options, lots of tools how to damage or even how to destroy the Russian economy. So most likely lots of interesting things are ahead of us. Furthermore, this evening the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, made lots of statements regarding the future plans and future doctrines of Ukrainian defense. So everything that he stated probably tell us, first of all, that Ukraine is not going to accept any proposal or any demand from the Russian side, and that Ukraine will continue resisting. Of course, everything depends not just on just one wish or willing of the president of Ukraine, Zelensky. Lots of things depends on the European countries, and lots of things depends on the frozen assets of the Russian Federation. So the sources, the European countries currently are trying to force Belgium to use the Russian assets and to provide these Russian assets to the European countries and to Ukraine to rearm harm Ukraine or something like this. And you know that something tells me that this might happen. And of course, if this happens, Ukraine will have additional half a year or even a year to resist and to continue fighting with the Russian Federation. And a lot of things can be changed during this period of time, but at the same time, the situation could become much worse in comparison with the current situation. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the Zaporozhye direction. The armored forces of the Russian Federation continued their offensive operation. The sources are saying that the Russians are advancing across the entire R85 road. This evening, lots of pro-Russian sources made significant changes on the ground between current positions of the armored forces of the Russian Federation and the river of Gaichul and R85 road. So some sources have already stated that everything, let's say, along this red line is already under complete control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. And of course, if this information is correct, this means that the R85 road is about to be captured by Russians, and most likely Russians will continue offensive operation further. And as we discussed in the previous videos, if Russians are able to cross the river of Gaichul, then most likely the days for the city of Zaporozhye will be numbered. As for the city of Pokrovsk, during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received lots of updates. The most interesting updates are coming from the area to the north of the settlement of Rodinskaya. Several pro-Russian sources published this video, and here we can see how a Russian drone was flying above the city of Rodinskaya, above the main supply lines of the armored forces of Ukraine. And here we can see too many destroyed vehicles of the armored forces of Ukraine that were trying to enter the city of Rodinskaya, and as you can see, everything was destroyed as a result of Russian fire. So this is not the territory to the south of the city of Rodinskaya, where we could see the cemetery of the Western weapon. This is another cemetery that was created, but this time in the vicinity of the city by the name of Rodinskaya. Too many vehicles were destroyed as a result of clashes. Ukraine suffered huge losses and at the end were forced to fall back. We believe that in coming days we're going to change the map in the Russian favor completely. Furthermore, according to different sources, the Russians began unexpected attack to the west of the settlement of Zatishak, and as a result of offensive, the Russians managed to improve their positions significantly. As you can see, this is the situation in this area by the end of the 28th of November, and this is the situation by the end of the 29th of November. Currently, the distance between positions of the armored forces of the Russian Federation and the settlement of Belitska is already around 1 kilometer, which is nothing, which means that tomorrow or even this night, upcoming night, Russians can try to answer the settlement of Belitska and to dig in deeper in the most southeastern part. If it happens, obviously this is going to be a complete collapse of Ukrainian defense. Another important piece of news is coming from the settlement of Sofiivka. During the previous 24 hours, several pro-Russian sources stated that Russians managed to answer the village from the south and from the northeast. Currently, there are very heavy clashes, and several sources reported that Ukrainians, most likely in coming 24-48 hours, would be forced to fall back from the village, and the Russians will secure the territory completely. As for the city of Konstantinovka, during the previous 24 hours, several sources reported that Russians managed to improve their position significantly along the northern bank of the Kliban-Bytskaya water reservoir. Now the Russians are trying to advance in the northwestern direction through these forests with the purpose to get the settlement of Bereztok from the south. We believe that in coming days the Russians will continue offensive operation also from the southwestern direction in the same area towards the northern part of the Kliban-Bytskaya water reservoir. Russians will try to capture these territories, and then from these positions they will try to attack further in the northern direction. Now let's talk about the Seversk-Liman direction. During the previous 24 hours, the most important updates came from the settlement of Dibrova. The armored forces of the Russian Federation managed to improve their positions significantly. This is the map by the end of the 27th of November, and this is the map how the map was adjusting during the previous days. Currently, the clashes are taking place in the central part of the village. If Ukrainians lose control with Dibrova, most likely they would be forced to fall back in the western direction. And it seems that the Russians most likely will continue offensive operation further in the direction of the TO514 road with the purpose to cut this road and to establish complete control over the Ukrainian logistic. This will force the Ukrainians to change the configuration of their defense, and Ukrainians would be forced to fall back in the southwestern direction with the purpose to create, let's say, defense layer somewhere in this area in the vicinity of the settlements of Shurovo, Mayaki and Donetskaya. Another important offensive several days ago was started in the area of the village of Barova. The armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to break through Ukrainian defense and enter the dense network of the fortifications which is located around the settlement of Barova itself. So this is the offensive that was carried out by the Russians, and these are the changes on the map between the dates. This is the end of the 28th of November and this is the end of the 29th of November. We are waiting for additional updates from this territory, but we believe that in coming days the Russians first of all will try to establish complete control over this dense network of the fortifications. If Russians are able to capture these strongholds around the settlements of Barova and Shiikivka, then most likely we can start counting days before the fall of the city of Barova itself, because the city of Barova is located on the Russian side of the river Voskol, and from these positions most likely Russians will be able to establish complete FPV drone control over the main supply lines, and this will lead to complete collapse first of all of the Ukrainian defense between the villages of Novoplatonovka and Boguslavka, and in the end the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back from this area in the southern direction towards the settlement of Pisky-Radkovsky. But as for this territory, I would like to remind you that currently the Russians are also trying to attack the settlement of Karovy Yar with the purpose to get as close as possible to the river Voskol as well, with the purpose to cut the southern roads for the Ukrainian logistic purposes. We believe that the Barova direction most likely will collapse in coming months or two. As for the northeastern part of the Kharkiv region, the armed forces of the Russian Federation currently continue offensive operation and the clearing process in the territory of the village of Vilcha. During the previous 24 hours, the group of forces north and their official channel stated that the Russians managed to improve their position significantly on the territory of the settlement, that the Russians managed to capture a territory of more additional 500 meters, which means that the battle for this village is also coming to the logical end. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds that we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.